Good evening, explorers, and welcome to the range.
And today, we are going over some of the guns of Into the Radius, but in real life. Or at least some comparable and affordable alternatives. I have done my best to get one gun for each caliber, with the exception of 5.45 and 9x39. Let's get into it. Starting off our list, we have the humble Macarov, chambered in 9x18. This one specifically is Bulgarian made, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't really find much information on the technical differences between this and the Russian made ones. So if you know any, leave them down in the comments, I would love to be enlightened. What I can say about the Macarov is, despite where it comes from, it is extremely simple in its operation, being a straight blowback design. Basically, the only thing keeping a round in battery is spring tension and the weight of the slide, both of which are abnormally high, at least by modern standards. This simple operation makes the Macarov incredibly reliable. Some call it the A-cave of the pistol world. The downside is its low mag capacity and relatively underpowered cartridge that it fires. 9x18, just for reference, is typically both lighter and slower than 9x19, the far more common and well-known 9mm cartridge. Other features include a safety decocker, meaning if the safety is engaged while the hammer is back, it will drop, ideally without firing the gun. Also, while the safety is engaged, the slide locks up entirely. So, in theory, this makes the gun very safe, but it does have a few drawbacks. The main one being, if you want to carry it hot unsafe, you're going to have to suffer through that rather icky double-action trigger pull on the first shot, which isn't a big deal, but at least for me, it will affect the first shot's accuracy. Also, to remove the mag, you push back this little tab on the bottom of the grip, which bothered me a lot at first, but after using it more and more, I've come to hate it very slightly less. Overall though, despite this little guy's lack of raw power and capacity, I still appreciate its affinity for reliably dispensing lead. Next up, we have the TT33, chambered in 7.62x25. The Tokarev I have here today is the Romanian Zastavov M57, which is almost identical aside from a few details. The most notable being that it has an extended grip and therefore takes slightly longer 9-round magazines, as opposed to the TT's 8-rounders. The design is heavily reminiscent of the 1911, being a short recoil tilting barrel design. Another major difference is that the TT33 does not have any form of manual safety, while the M57 has a thumb safety and a mag safety. This was a requirement to make the gun importable to the US. Also, just FYI, mine has a pretty serious binding issue between the slide and the frame, so I have to slap it in the back of the head almost every shot. I think the best feature about this gun is the round that it fires, the 7.62x25 cartridge, firing a 30 caliber projectile at around 1500 feet per second. Very high for a pistol caliber round, and pretty underrated in my opinion. I wish more guns used it. Also, before my horrendous binding problem, the gun ran flawlessly and handled surprisingly well. I'm actually really sad about the state it's in. Anyway, overall, even though it is a copy of a classic American design, it still carries a unique and lovely personality. Moving on is the M9, chambered in 9x19, or most commonly referred to as just 9mm. Today, I am bringing out the Beretta 92F in its place. The Beretta 92F and 92FS are the civilian or commercial versions of the M9, which is the US military designation for it. There are technically a few differences, the most major being the sights. The 92FS has a double dot rear aperture, while the M9 has a single dot rear aperture. Although, at least on my 92F, mine seem to have the M9 style, so I don't really know on this one. Other than that though, they are pretty much identical. The Beretta M9 was the standard US military sidearm from 1990 all the way up until 2017. Although it is still in service, it is due to be slowly phased out in favor of the new M17 made by SIG. The Beretta 92 series of handguns are battle-tested and iconic. Personally, I love them. Like the Macarov though, it does have a safety decocker. Again, something I personally don't like, but it's not a huge deal. Overall, these handguns are a favorite of both explorers and soldiers alike. Simple, reliable, comfortable, it gets the job done. Moving on, we have the MP412 Rex chambered in .357 Magnum. Unsurprisingly, I do not have an MP412. Almost nobody does, as it never actually saw mass production. Instead, I have the Colt Trooper Mark III. Introduced in the 1960s, many liken it to the budget Python. That being said, the Python is a pretty high bar to reach, and the Trooper 3 only comes out marginally short, being made out of lower quality parts and lacking some minor features. In any case, it's still a great piece, and packs a punch with its powerful .357 Magnum round. This gun is double action, meaning the hammer does not have to be back to fire. As the trigger is pulled, it will bring the hammer back to its apex, at which point it will slam back down and fire the weapon. However, this double action pull is quite heavy and will be more difficult to do, so I recommend cocking the hammer back manually before firing. This way you get a light, crisp, single action trigger pull, which is much easier to be accurate with. Also doing that is just objectively cooler, obviously. Overall, revolvers are a fucking vibe, and this one especially just tickles me right. Next up is the ICH-81, chambered in 12 gauge. And standing in for it is the Remington 870. An iconic American classic designed in the early 50s, it's still produced to this day in many, many variants for civilian, police, and military use. It also comes chambered in damn near every kind of shotgun round you can think of, and in damn near any configuration. Today though, the one I have is the Police Magnum variation with a 7+1 capacity and accepting either the standard 2-3 shells or the 3-inch shells. I also have a side caddy for additional storage of shells like the one the ICH-81 has in-game. The power of a 12 gauge at its optimal range is absolutely nothing to scoff at. In the words of Clint Smith,
pistols put holes in people, rifles put holes through people. Shotguns at the right range with the right load will physically remove a chunk of shit off your opponent and throw that shit on the floor.
The advantage to a pump action mechanism is reliability. This thing is almost impossible to jam up, and it can fire pretty much any kind of shell out of it as long as it's the appropriate length. Semi-autos often struggle in this aspect and need either specific loads or an adjustable gas system. Overall though, nothing quite beats the feeling of slamming some 12 gauge downrange. Next up is the M4, chambered in 5.56 NATO. I do not have an M4, because that's full auto and therefore pretty fucking neat. You know what isn't neat? The government. Anyway, I do however have an AR-15. The best thing about ARs in my opinion is just how fucking diverse they are. They come in all shapes and sizes, outfitted for different tasks and purposes. From marksman rifle setups for as much range as the 5.56 will allow, to short and sleek suppressed carbines for the tactical vibe, to whatever the fuck that thing is. There are a million ways to build out an AR, and this is mine. Right now I have an MP412 lower. The upper, I have no idea who made it, but it's got a 223 wild chamber and a 16-inch 1/8 twist rate barrel. Comparing this thing to the stock MP412 upper, this is substantially heavier too. The only downside is that it's key mod, and I didn't know the difference when I bought it. I just saw it at a gun show and thought it looked cool, which I still believe, but the key mod part kinda sucks. In case you don't know, it was an M-LOK mounting alternative that turned out to be just not as durable, so accessories aren't commonly made to mount them on natively. So I have to use Picatinny adapters. Besides that though, I got a vertical grip and an EOTech holographic sight as my main optic with flip-up irons as backup. I do want to get the magnifier for this so I can push my potential range out a bit easier though. Anyway though, despite some teething issues early on, the AR platform has become the gold standard for rifles with a range of capabilities and price points it can provide. And overall, even though I love my AK and prefer it aesthetically, my practical sensibilities scream AR all the way. Speaking of AKs, moving on, we have the AKM chambered in 7.62 by 39. Of course, the AKM being full auto and Russian, I don't have one. What I do have though is the Romanian Wasser 1063, a semi-auto only AK made by Kugir Arms Factory and distributed by Century Arms. And besides the lack of a fun switch, this is pretty much identical to the source material. The 63 suffix indicates that the rifle was partially made using former Romanian military parts instead of all new parts like the Wasser 10. Allegedly, these were considered bottom of the barrel by some, but as for me, well, mine seems to work pretty good.
Chris, hand me my drum. I'm letting the dogs out for this one.
No, but seriously, maybe I just lucked out, but out of the thousands of rounds I've fired, I've only ever had a single malfunction that wasn't mag-related. Or that, at least I'm pretty sure wasn't mag-related. She runs like a dream and feels like one too. For pure fun factor, this is probably my favorite gun. When I get my fucking bread up, I plan on customizing it a bit with an underfolding stock, a nice erect dog, and some kind of dovetail mounted optic. This thing is destined for greatness, I assure you. There's a reason why the AK has become such a prolific rifle since its introduction. A revolutionary design that changed the game for firearms development moving forward. Overall, I fucks with it. Next on our list is the M14, chambered in 7.62 by 51 NATO. I don't have any derivatives of any of the 7.62 NATO guns in ITR, but I do have the M14's daddy, the Pingalicious M1 Garand. And for starters, this is not chambered in 7.62 NATO, although there were some later ones that were. This is chambered in 30-06, which when compared, yeah, the 30-06 has a considerable amount more ass behind it, so naturally it hits a bit harder. At least if we were talking about modern loadings. Still, the two are pretty comparable. Designed in 1928 by John Garand and adopted for US military service in 1936, this rifle came just in time for the largest conflict in human history, the Second World War. This rifle gave American infantry a distinct combat advantage over pretty much everyone else, especially in the early days of the war, who were still using bolt actions like the Kar 98K, Lee Enfield, and Mosin Nagant. It was dubbed by General George S. Patton as the greatest battle implement ever devised. Its service lasted until 1958 when it was replaced by the M14. Fun fact, it's a fairly common misconception that the design of the AK was based on the German STG-44, when in all reality it shares a lot more DNA with the M1 Garand, at least from a mechanical perspective, both being long-stroke, gas piston-driven rifles. Although you could argue that the STG inspired the AK from a battle doctrine perspective. Overall, this beast of a battle rifle is treasured by many of us Americans, who still receive dopamine every time we hear that. And finally, our last gun of the day, but certainly not the least, is the Mosin Nagant, chambered in 7.62 by 54R. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact right rifle. The one in-game is the carbine length version, while the one we are showcasing today is the full rifle length. The Mosin Nagant is one of the most produced rifles in history, with well over 37 million manufactured. Designed in 1891, this bolt-action rifle shoots the potent 7.62 by 54R cartridge, which is still produced to this day. This round definitely shows its age, with its rim design. This makes it pretty easy to extract, however, it doesn't fare too well inside of magazines, as if they aren't staggered forward properly, the rims can catch on one another. Affectionately referred to as the garbage rod by both its supporters and detractors alike, the Mosin is still seeing use to this day from everything from hunting to even modern military conflicts. Honestly, there isn't a whole lot to say about it that I didn't go over in my ITR range video. It's about as simple and dependable as a bolt-action gun gets, even if the bolt can feel like sandpaper sometimes. Overall, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and what this gun lacks purely in value, it makes up for in just being plain cool. And that about does it. This video took forever to put together. So, I don't usually like to ask, but I would greatly appreciate it if you drop a like, maybe a sub? Also, comment down below what you liked, what you didn't, and what you would want to see if I made more content like this. Firearms is one of my passions, and I would love to do more videos on them. Preferably stuff that goes a little deeper than what we did here today. Anyway, I've got some more ITR stuff on the way here soon. Until next time, explorers.
I forgot my fucking ear pro again. Ah. Good evening, explorers. This video took a little while to get out. Sorry, this little last bit is a little improv. It is very hot out today. We're all very sunburned, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Yeah, if you guys like this and want to see more of this, let me know. Hopefully we can, get a little bit more organized. Hopefully we can get a little bit more organized next time and, bring together a slightly higher quality thing. I wanted to do the script, on site instead of having it, edited into the video. But unfortunately, I just couldn't really figure out a good way to do that. Hey, yo, what up, boys? We're gonna be leaving the range here soon, but we just this real quick. So I got these little fucking, they're clean shot shotgun rounds. There we go, clean shot shotgun rounds. I guess you're supposed to use them after you shoot. So we're gonna shoot them, but we're gonna shoot them at this water bottle that we have extra. So just to see what it does. Open that thing up. Okay. Good. Crack it.